Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, where we're not sure if we need to be afraid of the eclipse. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Alex Mugler.
Welcome back to another edition of the Right Guys podcast. Happy Monday. Happy Eclipse Day.
Yeah. How was it at your place? Was it fun? Was it cool?
Anticlimactic. So I lived in Colorado when we had the eclipse there, so that was cool to watch.
Yeah, that was intense.
Then here was really not so much. This is the view of the eclipse from my house. Completely overcast. Not even like a little bit to peek through. And I looked around and I would have to drive a fair bit to get away from this cloud cover. So it's not worth it. Go driving with the crazies. The cool part was that it did get dark enough for all the birds to stop chirping. And in my neighborhood, like a dozen squirrels all just hit it to get back to their tree, thinking that the owls were going to come eat them or something. That was kind of cool to watch. But other than that, very anticlimactic.
It just got a little bit darker here. I mean, we had sunny skies, so when you're at the 60%, it kind of dips in there and then comes right back out. So. But still,
my house was 99.7%.
Wow!
So it wasn't complete. The only thing that really mattered was we didn't get a full 100%. We would have had a little tiny little hair. And the darkness time wasn't as long, but people are like, "Oh, you really got to drive half an hour to get that extra 0.003." I was like, "Oh, come on! This is my second. This is my second one. I think we can handle this."
I'm good. I mean, the next one is until like 2040 or something.
Yeah, 2045.
So Cannonball, welcome to it. He said,
welcome everyone to the stream today. Talking about this, going to talk about Donald Trump's his statement that he released today on abortion. And full disclosure, I haven't watched it yet. I want to watch it live here and get kind of a rapid response. I have a general idea of what he said, because I know what his position on this is, because his position hasn't really changed all that much. If I had to guess, we'll all watch it together, that he wants this to be a state's issue so that it doesn't draw people, abortion advocates, to the federal ballots, which isn't a terrible political strategy. And I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of pro-life people who hate him for this. And looking through Twitter, I know that the far left has already said that this reveals Donald Trump to be a pro-life radical. So it's been weird. So I want to watch this. Josh, have you had a chance to watch it yet today?
I did not. I was going to, but then I was like, you know what? If you want to do this live, let's just do it. Yeah. So
let's watch it. My predictions: it wants it to be a state's issue that people can vote on it, or their state legislatures can pass it, not a federal issue. And I have a feeling he's going to want to roll back anything that could be construed as wanting to stop IVF, in vitro fertilization, which we can talk about later. It's a big issue for really devout, dedicated pro-life activists. Not something that typically gets people excited if they're not really into this. But let's go ahead and watch it and see if I'm right.
Leadership, the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, and healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. What could be more beautiful or better than that? Today, I'm pleased that the Alabama legislature has acted very quickly and passed legislation that preserves the availability of IVF in Alabama. They really did a great and fast job. The Republican Party should always be on the side of the miracle of life and the side of mothers, father, their beautiful babies, and that's what we are. IVF is an important part of that, and our great Republican Party will always be with you in your quest for the ultimate joy in life. Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that All legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart or, in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. Do what's right for our country and vote. So important to vote. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want, the will of the people. I want to thank the 6 justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, incredible people, for having the courage to allow this long-term, hard-fought battle to finally end. This 50-year battle over Roe v. Wade took it out of the federal hands and brought it into the hearts, minds, and vote of the people in each state. It was really something. Now it's up to the states to do the right thing. Like Ronald Reagan, I am strongly in favor of exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. You must follow your heart on this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture and, in fact, to save our country, which is currently, and very sadly, a nation in decline. Our nation needs help. It needs unity. It needs us all to work closely together. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, everyone, we have to work together. We have to bring our nation back from the brink, and that's where it is. It's at the brink, and we will. We will do it. I promise you, we will do it. Always go by your heart, but we must win. We have to win. We are a failing nation, but we can be a failing nation no longer. We will make our nation great. We will make our nation greater than ever before. Thank you very much.
Okay, so not a whole lot there different from his policies before. I think that the part that conservatives, pro-life Americans kind of call BS on is that his promise to appoint judges who would overturn Roe versus Wade was based on his like jurisprudential like reading of what should like what powers the Supreme Court has. It's very obvious this was about being pro-life. Well, I'm sure many scholars did think, and I agree with them, that it went too far. The issue wasn't that the Supreme Court shouldn't have ever been able to do this. This was a pro-life issue, right? So I don't think anyone believes that this whole fight that Donald Trump waged was all about going back to the 70s and correcting a jurisprudential wrong, right? It's been about the pro-life movement. Now but with that said, he's never been the most pro-life person ever. I think everyone understood that he wasn't a pro-life activist. He wasn't out at the March for Life. He wasn't at these different events protesting in front of abortion facilities. I think many people attributed that to him. I don't know why, but they did. Probably because of how adamant he was about overturning Roe versus Wade. So there's not a whole lot here that surprises me. I think politically, the calculus that it's better for him for people not to think he's going to usher in a pro-life administration. I think that there is a legitimate political calculus to that, especially as we've seen how many people have turned out in some of these states voting for abortion to be legalized in their states. He seems pretty adamant that he wants this to be a states issue, not a federal issue. And he wants to make sure people understand that when he gets into office, his goal is not going to be to end abortion nationwide. You ask me, I think it would probably be nice to have a president who would do that. Whether that president can get elected, can get the 269, however many electoral votes you need to win, that's an entirely different question. But I want to get your take on it because it was interesting today to see people like, pull it up, Jenna Ellis, who everything he just said was pretty much Trump's policy as president. She was one of his legal advisors. She's now turned vehemently anti-Trump because he refused to pay her legal fees, turned against him as state's evidence.
Yeah.
She says, so weak, Trump punts on the issue of pro-life and pledges to support whatever states decide, including blue states that will allow abortion until the moment of birth. Follow your heart is a Hallmark card, not a strong, conservative, principled policy. But then you have the Biden-Harris HQ, which said, Donald Trump said he supports extreme abortion bans across the country that criminalize doctors, threaten IVF, and force rape victims to give birth. That's what they will be. This is madness because he spent half of that talking about how he doesn't want IVF to be threatened.
It doesn't matter. First off, it gives the left the talking points they want, right? No matter what comes out of his mouth, they're gonna put up the total anti statement on that. Pushing it on the state, this is like pandering to the base, at least part of the base that happens to be conservative, that is still pro-abortion. I know that's out there. I know a lot of women in healthcare, a lot of women with strong footing inside strong global blocks that are still pro-choice. It sounds like a statement saying, I'm not against abortion. I still want to leave it in the hands of the states. That way it doesn't completely go away. Because this is an election move. This is politics at its finest. It's trying to make sure that you're still having those potential votes on those undecideds out there, right? Because that's most likely the group that he's going after is those undecideds. They're down the middle. They really don't give a crap either way. And he's just trying to just move a little bit over on that Trump side. And it's done the right way. Roe versus Wade was just the Supreme Court legislating from the bench. I mean, that we had all known that, and that is just one more of those things that reinforces that the Supreme Court cannot make law and should not make law. But Roe versus Wade was considered the law of the land. It was called law of the land, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
And if Dems were really, really, really hard on making sure abortion is legalized, where's their bill on the House floor to say nationally legalize abortion, right? None of them taking a stand on it. Not a single one. And they don't care. It's just it's just politics at this point. And
Biden has basically said if you want that bill, you need to reelect Democrats again, just like he does with everything, right? If you want your student loans repealed, you have to reelect us again. He's trying to use it to buy support, right?
Tool.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way that the pro-life movement has really been structured over the past 50 some odd years. It's been about largely incrementalism. Because as you said, Roe versus Wade was considered the law of the land. And anytime you tried to do anything, the judges, the courts, Supreme Court, legislature, Congress, it would just suck the air right out of the room and say, oh, no, this is already settled. Why is this settled? Because unelected jurists in robes in Washington, D.C. decided the science. They decided the ethics. They decided the morality. It's already been decided. You have no right to weigh in. This is just how it has to be. And Congress would say, well, wait a minute. What about partial birth abortion, where a baby is partially born and killed during the birthing process? Can that be illegal? And there's all these Supreme Court fights on whether or not that should be allowed. What about funding abortion? Should the federal government be forced to fund it? It's amazing that the only thing that ever really happened is the swing to allow more federal involvement in it. So we've always had this incrementalism, and yeah, as you said, it was settled. It was a law of the land. It sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Couldn't do anything.
Couldn't even touch it.
Right. I've worked with groups in Ohio, for example, who just had a big ballot initiative that the pro-abortion side won, and that amendment is horribly written, terribly written, to allow way too much. I think that as people realize just what it's accomplished, I think that vote probably got a lot of people like you're talking about, the pro-choice Republicans say, oh no, I just want to go back to Roe versus Wade, not realizing that they're voting for something that goes much further than it. So even in these states, the other side saying, okay, it's settled now. This is how it's going to be forever. Ohio, it's a 50% plus one to change the Constitution. You start really educating the populace on the horrors of late-term abortion, on how big the loopholes are to qualify for a medical abortion. You start educating them on that, and then you're going to have to claw back. If you can't win outright and win these fights at the ballot box, you're going to have to educate the populace and claw some of this back, because these losses that we're suffering at the ballot box are largely stem from an education problem. An education problem. People think that they're voting for Roe versus Wade, and they're voting for far, far, far worse.
Yeah,
so
more.
I can't. It's obvious. Donald Trump is running against Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes in abortion at any time up until, and as Trump said, even beyond the moment of birth, being allowed to kill a child if the mother doesn't want the child. Donald Trump supports pro-life positions, says he's pro-life, has the exceptions, which I don't agree with the exceptions, but that's his prerogative, right? And says that the federal government will not mandate abortion be legal nationwide. Those are your two choices, right? So if you are a pro-life American like Jenna Ellis, it seems like it's an easy choice. Yeah, he might not agree with everything you support, which I would probably also put that a little bit on her, since she was one of his legal advisors, constitutional attorney. Not saying it's her fault, but could she have done a better job of educating him and bringing him to the pro-life position? Maybe. It seems very convenient that after counseling him so many years, Jenna Ellis is now saying, "Oh, I hate him." Well, collected the paycheck. That seemed like it wasn't a problem. It's an easy choice.
Well, there's two things here. You're a big proponent of voting with your feet. So if you live in a state where you know the taxes are going to be high and abortion rules the land, get out. Move to a state where it doesn't. Right. Start moving this electoral votes to the bigger areas where you know there's going to be a lot of conservative support. Do it. Right. Create another Florida. Create another Texas. Right. Do that. Get out of those states like New York, where you know they're just going to run roughshod over the top of it. So get out while you can, because it's only going to get worse in those states. And the other thing is that Trump kicks this out to the states now, where the power should lie on a lot of decisions. Right. We're always so willing to give power up to the federal government. And we do it in everything. Always willing to give that state power over to the feds. That this is one more of those things that the states need to be in control of. You've got to have these bastions where you can go that keeps you away from federal law. And we have lots of bad federal law because the states have given those powers up, right? Stop giving away your power. Yeah. And that's the first thing I'm seeing from this. Move away, keep the power to yourselves. And that's what this does. Anybody who's a constitutionalist should like that statement, right? They should appreciate that statement. The second part is that you talked about incrementalism, right? We're finally starting to see some incrementalism on the opposed abortion side, right? And it's going to take 50 years. It's going to take 100 years to get there. They've been spending the last 40 years on top of this. It's going to take 90 to undo it. And that's that education piece. And if it doesn't happen there, it's just not going to happen at all. So that's the only way this battle gets won, is by educating and moving to the states where you can fight. Yeah. Just don't give away the power, guys. I mean, everybody does it. How many times have we given away powers to the feds? And it's up. Pisses me off.
The IVF bit it's one of those things where if someone is adamantly pro-life, which I am, I oppose IVF because I know, like, I wouldn't eat hot dogs if I had to learn how hot dogs are made, right?
I don't eat them.
There's a willful ignorance that helps me continue to support that. When people figure out and learn what goes into IVF and what actually happens behind the scenes, if they are pro-life, they tend to also become against IVF, because IVF isn't just, oh, let's help fertilize one egg. The goal of IVF is to extract as many eggs as possible and to fertilize as many eggs as possible, and then play winner and loser and pick which ones should be implanted. Right?
It's a shocking approach.
In a world, and as a business, right, where you have these fertility doctors who want to have the highest success rate possible, of course it makes sense, and people are paying for this. Of course it makes sense to extract as many eggs from a woman as possible to have the highest likelihood of success. But for every one child that is successfully implanted, there is no escaping that IVF creates more human life that is, from acknowledged from the very beginning, will be destroyed, right? And this happens at every stage of the process, where, oh, well, this one developed and we can tell that there's going to be an abnormality, let's just kill this embryo. It also happens after implantation, where the goal is to make sure that it's successful, that a woman can give birth to a baby. Maybe they implant 3 embryos and all 3 take. Well, what happens when the mother says, oh, I didn't want 3, I actually just wanted 1 baby? The process after that is called selective reduction, which is just a fancy word for abortion. They then kill the 2 ones that they don't want. So when you look at this and you see throughout the entire process that they are extracting eggs, they're fertilizing eggs, they're implanting eggs, and at every stage of the process, they are willfully going to be killing a baby that is deemed to be unwanted. It's hard to embrace this technology as it's done. Like, in a world where they extract 1 egg, they fertilize 1 egg, they implant 1 egg, and it successfully implants or doesn't, I think a lot of pro-life people would be okay with that, because you're not deliberately discarding human life that's determined by a doctor to be unworthy of being given a chance, right? But the selective reduction bit, I mean, I can at least understand where people are coming from, saying, oh, this was an unwanted pregnancy, I didn't know this was coming. When someone goes into a doctor's office and says, okay, implant as many embryos in me as possible, so I have the highest likelihood of success, you can't then say it's an unwanted pregnancy. You've literally paid for the pregnancy, right? And so even when they are successful, they still also often will perform abortions and kill 1 or 2 of those babies. So it's hard as a pro-life person, when you know how it's done, to support it. I think there are ways that they could do it. It might not be financially viable to do it 1 egg at a time, but there are ways where you could probably get pro-lifers to support it. But as it exists right now, if you are pro-life and you know how it happens, and you know that even when it's successful, it often leads to abortion, it's hard to support it. But that's not something the public knows, right?
Yeah,
all the public knows is Susie and Jim couldn't get pregnant. They went to this doctor, miracle of life, saved them. They got to have a baby.
Well, it goes back to education. Again, here we are. Like, how many schools can you go in the library and find books on how to perform sex on someone, right?
Yeah.
How many books can you find to say, this is how I changed my sex? But how often do you show somebody a video in class about what happens, abortion happens during your health classes? They won't show that, right?
No.
Because that's far too disturbing. I mean, you're showing the mutilation of a baby. But that, according to the left, would be part of health science, right? Part of the classes and reproductive stuff you need to learn. But they don't show you those pieces. They only want to show you the pieces that have the pretty window dressing, right? They don't want to show you the baby that has been chopped apart to make that abortion happen. So people can't make decisions on abortion because they don't know what the outcome really is, right?
No.
They just don't know.
No.
And that's the ignorance of it. You know, and if I was doing IVF, you know how hard it would be to say, you've got 3 in here, choose 1. Like, I would not want to have to, like, each one of those is a precious human being. That's just waiting to be born and come out into the world. Like, I don't have kids, and it's part of the reason I never went with the IVF route, right? because I don't want to harm a life. I've had the good fortune of saving lives. I've never had the misfortune of having to take one. I don't want that on my conscience, And that's part of the education that you never tell people about, right? A life is ended
Yeah.
because you did this.
At every stage of the process. At every stage of the process. And sometimes it's for a good reason. Sometimes they fertilize an egg and an embryo forms that is clearly not all the chromosomes are there, and it's very obvious that this isn't going to survive. But the point is that they are creating more life than they, from the very beginning, say that they want. Right? I mean, imagine saying we need to create 8 children and we'll just whittle this down to the final one that we want, and we'll just kill the rest of them. It's very hard. It's very hard to wrap your head around that. And as people know what happens in this process, I have no ill will towards any people suffering from infertility problems who use IVF as a chance to grow their family, right? But the process has been developed in a way that ensures that for every life, that more human life is destroyed than created. And it's unfortunate. It's incredibly unfortunate. And you're right. We need that education component of it as well. Donald Trump mentioned that he believes in the exception of rape, incest, life of the mother. People say this over and over and over again. And it doesn't often get explained what that really means. Rape and incest combined account for less than 1% of all abortions. So right from the bat, we are taking a very extreme example of something that happens very seldomly, and we're allowing that to be pushed into the forefront as if it's something that happens often. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen statistically often. And life of the mother, people have an idea of what that is. Life of the mother, the baby's killing them. No, what life of the mother has become in policy and in law is an understanding that pregnancy itself is inherently dangerous. And they basically go as far as to say that maternal mortality rates alone justify abortion. That's very different than the baby.
Wow. Really?
The arguments are that pregnancy itself could be too dangerous for the mother. They look at things like, this woman has really severe anxiety diagnosed. We think that she might kill herself from the stresses of parenthood. I'm a parent of 2 kids. I'll tell you, the stresses of parenthood, they push you, they push you pretty far.
All the way, right? There are times,
Yeah, but that isn't a bug; it's a feature, right? And so, to use the tech language, we both come from the tech world. It's a bug. It's a feature, not a bug. A feature, not a bug. So when you hear like, parenthood's going to be really stressful, so we should just kill the baby. When you explain to people who are programmed to say, exceptions, rape, incest, life of the mother. We explain just how far they're stretching the life of the mother, because most states also have life and health of the mother. Think about that. Not even life-threatening.
Right. So typically women are very robust, especially when they get pregnant. And it is amazing how tough women are. So this argument that, women are delicate, can't fight that fight of pregnancy I just don't believe it. I think women are strong. They were made for this, and they should. The other parts that's bothering me in this is how many people are using abortion as a form of contraceptive. That's really who's going after this, right? And the second part is it's a statement. I just can't stand the people that use it as a contraceptive, right? And just make that selective choice.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
If you know that you have underlying conditions that make pregnancy potentially life-threatening, morally and ethically, it should be your goal in life to ensure that you don't create a human life that you have to then take that human life. Out of all the exceptions, the only one I can even say I can kind of understand is a bona fide life of the mother exception, because that falls under inalienable right to self-defense. If you can prove that another human is killing you, right, whether inside the womb or out, I can wrap my head around it might be ethically, morally justifiable. It would I would never want to find myself in that situation. I don't know what I would say in the moment if I had to make that decision, but I can at least wrap my head around that conceptually. If something is actually a bona fide threat to your life, not this other stuff where like, oh, well, it is lots of women die in pregnancy, which is true. So therefore any woman should have the right to an abortion because she might be in that minority of women who could pass away. You could then save her life. That's a crazy argument designed to make abortion as widespread as possible. And it's even worse because new data reveals that the maternal death rate has been overestimated in recent years because of a pregnancy checkbox that the CDC implemented in 2003. Basically, they've been counting every time a woman dies, there's a pregnancy checkbox. Is she pregnant? Was she recently pregnant? And if that box was checked, it automatically got put into the maternal mortality basket.
Check basket. Yeah.
What they're saying is that there were far more deaths added into that basket where pregnancy had nothing to do with it than they ever could have imagined. So there are a lot of cases that built into, because we've all seen the headlines, right? U.S. maternal mortality rate skyrockets. Oh, and there's an epidemic in the African American community. That the hospitals aren't. Yep. And it was all based on just a tally of how many people died with that box checked.
But it's data, Max, and they love their data. It's all based on data. We don't make decisions on feelings. We make them on data. You know, if that was the case, I knew a couple in their 40s who got pregnant, and the test did come back saying your child would have Down syndrome. And they were pressured to abort this baby all the time. Every time they visited the pediatrician, whatever doctors they had, abort this baby now, abort this baby now.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't do it because that was God's gift to them. They got pregnant. They were later in life, right? They'd been trying their whole lives. IVF failed for them. The day they do get pregnant, you know, it's going to be a Down syndrome. And the doctors that were trying to get them pregnant, now that got them pregnant, and they are there, the first thing they tell them is, let it go. Let it go. But no.
Have you seen the Shane Gillis? Have you seen the Shane Gillis bit on Down syndrome?
No, is it funny?
It's wholesome and funny. His whole thing is he has Down syndrome family members. He always says, "Oh, it almost got me. It nicked me." But his whole thing is that he has members of his family who have Down syndrome, and they're the happiest people in his family. They're the ones living the best life. That he has, I think it was an uncle who just wakes up in the middle of the night and just makes an absurd amount of grilled cheese sandwiches, uses up all the bread, and he gets called on it the next day. Were you up making grilled cheese sandwiches? He's like, no. And he looks over and says, yeah, I was. He's just eating grilled cheese sandwiches all day long. This idea that Down syndrome is a death sentence, it's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah.
Obviously, your heart goes out to anyone who gets that diagnosis, right? But even other diagnoses like trisomy 16, I think is the number.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. Yeah,
trisomy 16. That used to be a complete death sentence. For many people, it still is now. But there are adults with this diagnosis walking around among us. It's reached the point where if you survive after your first year of life, you have really good odds to make it into like past the age 10, which no one likes hearing that. Like you never like hearing that, but this idea that you have to kill a baby because they won't survive. The statistics don't bear it out, especially because, as you said, at every stage of the process, there are doctors pressuring them into getting abortions. Well, of course, the data doesn't show it's survivable if everyone is being pressured into having abortions.
Yeah. The couple I knew that ended up giving birth to a beautiful Down syndrome baby who is one of the happiest people I ever met were told that this will be a huge drain on you. And for the rest of life, you're going to be taking care of a giant walking baby. And then the next argument that was made, and I won't say who's making it, is that this individual's person that was dealing with this was told that this is going to be a huge drain on the health care resources in
Mm,
their area and how much it's going to cost everyone else, right? So not only are you
mm.
burdened with it, you're burdening everyone else in the healthcare sector with it because this
Ooh,
person requires more attention. Could you imagine that argument being made? Because what happens if I've got a heart
yeah,
problem and we go to a
yeah.
system where I'm too much of a drain on the system, right?
You should
Where I'm
move. You
too
should
much,
move. Yeah.
yeah. But that's the
Wow.
mentality, right? You're putting too much pressure on everyone else. You're putting a burden on society by creating that life.
What do
When
you?
young people hear that from a doctor, how do you
Yeah.
think they're going to react?
Oh, of course. Of
They're
course.
going to lose their minds. But fortunately, these are two adults who love God and brought in a beautiful baby, right?
There's a lot of research to try and identify the genetic components of autism
Mhm.
and to make autism diagnosable. They want to diagnose autism in the womb. So for something like that is so clearly a spectrum where there are some people who are nonverbal who eat household objects and can really put themselves in danger, right? I know someone who was diagnosed with autism and they would eat the filling in the couch cushions. That's
Yeah.
very bad and very dangerous, right? Especially if you leave them alone. So there's that, but there's also some of the most genius composers of music, scientists,
Yeah.
right? Who
Albert
were on the
Einstein may
spectrum.
have been
Yeah.
on the spectrum,
Yeah.
right? I
Who were
mean,
on the spectrum. The idea that they want to make that discoverable and understanding the goal in life of what they want to accomplish from that kind of in utero genetic testing, what they would deprive humanity of.
yeah, because you don't get another Leonardo or Da Vinci. Da
Yeah,
Vinci was
yeah, yeah,
probably on the spectrum. I mean, dude
yeah.
was
Elon
off,
Musk
but
probably
yeah,
is. If we're
I mean,
being
pick some
honest,
of those
love him.
guys.
Yeah,
Yeah, but but you deprive the world of something. You deprive them of genius. What if genius is related to autism, right? And then we deprive the world of geniuses moving forward.
yeah,
We are
yeah,
so arrogant thinking that we understand what the outcome is later in life from a child who's in the womb. The only one who knows that is God. And if you say that you do, you are acting as God yourself, right? You do not know what
yeah,
that person's going to become. You
yeah,
just don't. So why
yeah.
claim that you can?
It has always struck me, and I write about this in my book. It's always struck me how we have all of these laws protecting people with disabilities and genetic abnormalities, whatever you want to call them. We have all these laws protecting them once they leave the womb, but it's open season as long as they haven't breached the birth canal. And so where's the American with Disabilities Act to protect against that kind of discrimination? Well, it doesn't exist because for the longest time, babies aren't considered people under federal law as it relates to these specific statutes. But there's other parts of this. There is a such thing as sex selective abortion. People who
Yeah.
wanted a boy, the ultrasound shows a girl, and they choose abortion. It is incredibly common in Asia and among Asian families here in the United States. There's research from China, from the one child policy. When families wanted a second child, they wanted to risk government fines and imprisonment, right, and all the regulations. Like the first child, the data showed that it was like it's 50-50. 50% chance the first child was a boy, 50% chance the first child was a girl. When it comes to the second child, it jumped. It's like 60-70% chance of a boy on the second time around.
Mhm.
Now, are we supposed to believe that the laws of probability, which is that's what it is, fertilization of an egg, it's probability, 50%. It's like 51-49, but it's coin flip odds. Are we supposed to believe that coin flip odds don't apply in this one country of the world, China? Or are we going to accept the more rational explanation that the reason that boys amount to so much of a higher percentage of second children born is that when the ultrasound showed it was a girl, they had an abortion?
Yeah. And these are just the numbers that were at hospitals. Imagine how many people ended up having a child
Yeah,
and just left in the forest. I mean,
yeah,
I know I trained with a wonderful person once, and she was left on the roadside in India because she was born a girl. Fortunately, she was rescued and adopted by Americans, but that was the point. They just didn't want daughters. They took a child all the way to term. It comes out, it's a girl, and they dump it off. So you don't see those numbers, right? And does that does happen. If you don't think it doesn't, you're living in a fantasy world. So, and it blows my mind that people they all want data to say something, and they'll take that data and they use it to push their narrative.
Yeah. So here I will I'll give you the exact number. So normally it's supposed to be 1.05 to 1. That's the average that we see on the planet Earth, which is roughly 51% are baby boys, 49% are girls, roughly 50-50.
Yeah.
In not just India and China, but also in some Indian American communities, Asian American communities here in the United States, we have seen the sex ratio jump for second and third children. So among Indian,
Really?
Korean, and Chinese families in the United States, when they have a girl as their first child, the sex ratio for their second child is 1.17 to 1.
Wow, it's dropped. So a full
No,
order of magnitude.
male to female. So 1.17 to 1, jumping up from natural 1.05 to 1. So it's a 12% jump. They're 12% more likely to have a boy as a second child than they would as a first child. When they have a girl as their first, if both their first and second children are girls, this is where it gets really evil.
Yeah.
If they have a first child, it's a girl. Second child, it's a girl. The third child, the odds of it being a boy, the ratio is 1.51 to 1.
Oh my gosh.
So basically 75%, 50% more than normal.
Yeah, this is not happening on 50-50 odds.
No, it's not by, and that's in the United States. That's in the United States. That's not in Asia. That's in the United States. And that's people saying, okay, we've had 2 kids. We want to have a third kid, but we need a boy for cultural and religious purposes. We need a boy to inherit our stuff. We need a boy to take care of us when we are older. There are ethno-religious, cultural, financial reasons for this, but it is not an accident that the odds of a boy coming to a family that already has 2 girls is so much higher. It's not an accident. It's not a crazy issue of probability. It defies science. It defies probability, except for the fact that that they are engaging in sex-selective abortions. So we have laws in this country that say you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. Why do those laws not apply when it comes to abortions? Why are we okay with such a large incidence of sex-selective abortion? Race-selective abortions, those are real. People get pregnant and they are impregnated by a boyfriend of a different race. And the sole reason that they want an abortion is because they do not want to give birth to a child of that mixed race. In every other aspect of our law, we have protections for people so they cannot be discriminated against on the basis of their race. Except for this case. And this does happen. Race selective abortions, unfortunately, do happen in this country.
And it's happening all the time, but you never hear about it. No one's told about it. I mean, you wrote a book on it. You're one of the few people that I know that talks about it.
Big book.
Yeah, cha-ching, get that one. But how much time do you think Joe Biden wasted to counter Trump's statement? Took about 60 seconds.
60 seconds, yeah.
Yeah.
So the statement was 4 minutes long. Yeah. The release, the counter release came out before they could have possibly watched the statement.
Yeah. And Joe Biden's team put up a tweet that has Biden watching it on the phone, supposedly, because I don't think he knows what the phone is.
Oh, with Bernie Sanders? No, that's for
no. This is just him watching it. And the tag over the video is, if you reelect me and Kamala Harris, will be the reason it's restored. It starts with Donald Trump as the reason Roe versus Wade is ended. Democrats don't care whether it is legal or not. What they care about is whether you vote for them to try to make you think they're going to do something for you, right?
Yeah.
That's it. It is only a tool to them. Because if they were serious about it, why haven't they already nationally mandated it? Why? Where are they?
No, they just want to buy the votes. They just want to buy the votes.
And they think they're
I
going
don't
to
know.
but
This is an issue that's really dividing the country, and it divides right on people's sex. Young Gen Z women are skewing heavily Democrat because of this issue. The opposite is you're seeing Gen Z men skewing conservative because they recognize how ridiculous everything else is in the country and want to fix that, and abortion isn't their issue. So conceivably, without abortion being an issue, you would think that Gen Z women would go the same route as Gen Z men, right? So obviously that's not completely true. Women have trended Democrat for a while, but you can't help but wonder. So again, this statement from Trump doesn't surprise me. It's not all that much different than the statement he put out when he wrote his book in 2015, running for president. I believe in abortion with those 3 exceptions. That's what he said. Roe versus Wade should be abolished. It should be sent back to the states. And that's always been his position.
Yeah. So what kind of rights do men have when it comes to selecting abortion or not? So let's say, I thought that was the answer, right? And maybe that's why Gen Z men are making it an issue now, because they know that the moment they get a woman pregnant, they have no rights in it. Like I can't sit. She wants to get rid of it. I want to keep it. She trumps everything else and gets to go with it, right? Because she's the one. It's her body, her selection. But it's still half of his DNA.
Yeah.
Right. So should he have half of the right?
He's financially on the hook too.
Yeah, responsible. Yeah, I haven't even gotten to that part yet, right? Because once the child's out, he has to then put he's on the hook, right? He has to financially support that child. So it's kind of an odd statement because where's the talk about men having a right in this whole situation? And I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of hate mail saying this is just a women's health right issue, which seems to be the message of the left, right? It's a women's health right issue, only a women's health right issue.
Well, no, men can get pregnant. Men can get pregnant now, according to them.
So then, where's his rights of pregnancy then?
And that's a really funny thing that butts heads. Like, this is women. You can't talk about this. Also, men can get pregnant.
Well, if I can get pregnant, then I have more than a right to talk about it. So they're going to tell me I don't have a right to talk about it because I don't have, but I can get pregnant apparently.
Yeah.
So
apparently. No, it's so. The part that's like the radical part of this is, it's my body, my choice. You have no say in it. If a woman knows who her child's dad is, she is allowed to give birth to the child and leave the space on the form blank for who the father is. And then the father would have to go through all of this legal court battle, DNA testing, to have parental rights, right? If he wants it. That to me has always seemed wild. Like, it's one thing if you don't know who the father is, that's fine. If you know who the father is and you're deliberately denying them parental rights, that to me has always seemed really weird. Because on the flip side, a woman can also name a parent as on the birth certificate, and all of a sudden that man now assumes financial responsibilities without his say. There have been people who have been conned into paying child support for a child that wasn't theirs. Now, they were either in a relationship with this woman, or this woman gave birth outside of a relationship and just said it was their child. And there's a lengthy process they have to go through to get that solved and fixed. It's just
often it doesn't though, and he's still on the hook. And there's no getting his money back for any of it, right? The guy still ends up getting screwed the most.
Yeah. So it's never really made any sense that this is a women's issue, right? Because the flip side of this is, as a conservative, as a Catholic, as I like to consider I'm a decent person, I don't want to live in a country, a world, where the most vulnerable among us can be killed for any reason whatsoever, including some really heinous reasons. I have a right as a man to want to shape the society that I want to live in. Like when you say it's a women's right, what you're saying is that men have no right to weigh in on this issue whatsoever. Well, considering the fact that this same movement wants to bring it, as Trump said, past the 9 months, which is not him saying that sometimes pregnancy lasts 10 months. He's saying post-birth abortion, where if someone has an abortion, the abortion fails and the baby is born alive, that the doctors and nurses would deliberately leave that baby to die from exposure because that was the mother's intent. Yeah, there are states where they have stopped reporting these instances so that they can't be regulated. New York is a key one of them. They say it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. So now they are deliberately refusing to let hospitals, doctors, nurses report on these instances so they don't have to regulate them. But that's what we're talking about here. So when they say this is a women's right, they are also talking about the scenario where the baby is born alive and the nurses start wrapping the baby in a cloth and the mother says, nope, that's okay. Just leave it. Leave him or her. I don't want the baby. That's no one's decision.
Isn't it amazing that they don't like to add labels women and men? Everybody can be anything they want. But as soon as it comes to an issue that does affect women, suddenly it's a women's right issue.
Yeah.
I mean, everything has to be so sex neutral, right? Everyone, like, they don't even like the idea of gender. I've been told that gender isn't even, like, it's so fluid that no matter what, I can identify as whatever I want. So therefore, if I identify as a woman, can I have an opinion on abortion?
Yeah.
That's what the left's saying. They're very good about wanting to say women are in their own bucket. They get their own health rights, but everybody can be a woman if they want to.
Yep. Birthing person, not mothers. They're birthing people now.
Okay, so even better, right? Birthing person versus women's health rights. Clearly, if you cannot see that this is just pandering for a vote, then continue watching this show and share it with other friends, and make sure you do share this show.
The weirdest is these cases are happening. Biological men saying, I'm a woman, showing up at an OBGYN's office and demanding to be seen without any surgery, even. Not that the surgery would suddenly create sex organs that qualify for OBGYNs
that sounds like a waste of resources.
Yes. But now what's happening is when the OBGYN denies them, say, no, we don't treat you.
Lord. Yeah.
It is a discrimination case.
Yeah,
so what you're actually starting to see is you're starting to see OBGYNs basically pretend to go along with the delusion, putting grown men in stirrups and doing the checkup and say, oh yeah, time for your pap smear.
Yeah. How's that coming back? I mean, it's going to come back bad. There's only one orifice, right?
But you know what I mean? Like, okay, well, and they're just pretending like, okay, we did it. We gave you it. There you go. Yay. So brave. So stunning. So brave of you. Thanks for coming. You're probably good for the next 10 years. Come back.
And the thing is, it's like you said, because people are applauding it. Good for you. Yeah. You went and did it. Like, all their friends are like, oh, that was so brave of you. And there's the other half of the world that's like, are you crazy? Because you know you're not a woman, right?
No. Yeah. There's lots of crazy. We'll keep watching this. It was pretty stunning, as I said earlier, that Donald Trump went out of his way to spend half of his announcement saying that he wants IVF to be available, and yet Biden came out and said he's against IVF. Pretty wild take. Like, putting aside the politics, to just flagrantly lie like that, and also know that you can get away with it because you're only going to clip 10-15 second chunks. Obviously we started the episode, we're about to wrap up. We started the episode talking about the eclipse. I don't know if you saw this. There was a pretty remarkable segment on The View. Where the ladies from The View weighed in. And they believe that the solar eclipse, the earthquake in New Jersey, and the looming rise of a new brood of cicadas, which happen every 13 to 17 years, depending on the brood and species, like clockwork, They are saying this is all a sign of climate change.
We've got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. She ran down the hallway.
The rapture is here.
The rapture's here. And then also I learned that the cicadas are coming.
Cicadas.
Although I love
for the first time in
cicada.
No.
100 years.
No.
Two different. Well, this is what I read.
There's two different kinds of cicadas.
Yes, two different times are coming.
The good cicadas and the bad
But
cicadas.
for the first time in many, many years.
No, every 17 years this happens.
Well, that's
I
not
know
what
it's
I
good and
read.
bad
But
cicadas.
maybe you know better. But
in
I
a
will
way.
say all those things together would maybe lead one to believe that either climate change exists,
That's more
or
the
something
point.
is really
Except for
going
Even
on.
the clouds
Earthquakes
like
are not at the mercy of climate change. It's underground. I don't think that's...
It happens,
How about
and,
the warming of the planet?
the eclipse, they've known about the eclipse coming because eclipses happen.
So we'll be the only one trying to make sense.
You know that you have gone down the crazy rabbit hole when you start talking. Whoopi's like, whoa, no. No. Just so we're clear, what she's talking about is two different broods of cicadas emerging at the same time, which doesn't often happen. But there are different broods of cicadas. Some come out every 13 years, some come out every 17 years, right? So it isn't often that and there's different broods in the ground. It's not like it can only happen every 17 years. There's all different broods that all have staggered release dates, right? So if just taking a 13-year brood and a 17-year brood, this is simple math, people. The common denominator between 13 and 17 is 221. So if there were only two out there, you would expect there to be a crossover at some point, at least in a quarter millennium, right? Millennia. Like you expect that eventually they'll line up. But when you have all of these other broods, many broods, all coming up different years, it just happens. But no, that's climate change. The earthquake under New York, New Jersey, that's climate change. The fact that the moon came between the earth and the sun at just the right bit, that must be man-made climate change. We are affecting the lunar orbit.
The complete machinations of our solar system is apparently being affected by whether I drive an EV vehicle or not. And when Whoopi Goldberg is the voice of reason in the room, everyone else is nuts, right? I mean, there's no way around that. Like, who is this lady beholden to that she's just stamping out the talking points for the left on this show? There's no basis science or science fiction. Right? She just said, right? Like, Whoopi was rolling her eyes. Like, I wonder if there's times she realizes she's like, I just don't know how I do this. Right?
Listen, this is a cult, the climate change cult.
Yeah.
I don't deny that the Earth's climate is changing. I used to be very heavy into saltwater fish tanks. Still have one. But when you understand just how vulnerable some of these species are to slight changes in temperature, and you see it, you can understand the vulnerability of that. The problem is that when you actually look at what can be contributing to it, here's a study from the UK, which found that human beings, simply by breathing, accounted for 1% of 1% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, that number goes way up when you also include burps and farts. I'll tell you that. They also crunch those numbers. What you have to understand is when they start going on about the carbon that they're talking about is you. You are the carbon that they want to eliminate, because they're doing studies to show just how much damage is being caused by humans breathing, farting, burping.
Well, that's how you get population control. You got to show how dangerous the smartest animal is so you can control them. That's just insane garbage. Carbon dioxide is required for our environment to work. The worst greenhouse gas out there is water vapor.
We all breathe, and that has apparently caused lunar orbits to shift.
That's
The best example I can give of this is that when the conquistadors arrived in the New World, one of the ways that they were able to control the indigenous populations is through their knowledge of the star charts and their understanding of when eclipses would come. So I forget which conquistador explicitly, but a conquistador convinced the natives that he was basically a god and you can't go up against me by accurately predicting the next time a lunar eclipse would happen. And it blew the I think Mayans and Incans blew their minds, and they treated him like he was a god, when in reality he just knew when it was coming. Yeah. This on The View is their attempt to do the same thing to you. To take something that's easily predictable, they've known when it's happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, but to try and use the novelty of it to push another dogma, to push another way of thinking down your throat and try and seize power from you. It's not very different. Give you the final word.
When you look at global warming, you have to determine, when does your baseline start? Is it after the last ice age or before? Because if it's before, that means the world is cooling. If you look for it after the last ice age, it means the world is warming. So it's just science ready to turn government into a god.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at.
I'm old enough to remember when Al Gore said that within 10 years, Kilimanjaro would have no more snow on it.
Oh, I'm older than you, because I remember they were telling me that in like 1988, dude.
It is covered in snow right now.
Yeah,
it's covered in snow. But no, apparently it's all gone. Well, that's it for this edition of the podcast. Talk about a couple different topics today. If you like the podcast, subscribe to the pod. Links in the description. Like, follow, give us a thumbs up, comment. Going live on Twitter, on Rumble, so YouTube. So check us out there, and do subscribe. It does help us out a lot. That's it for this edition of the podcast.
Wait. Before we go, who are you taking tonight? Who wins the big game?
Oh, UConn.
Basketball.
UConn.
You going UConn? I thought UConn too, but I'll root for the other dog. So.
No, I mean, nothing against Purdue, but they choke a lot. They're a good team, but I can't tell you how many times I had them getting all the way and they just lose. I don't think anyone beats UConn. I don't think it's going to happen.
They looked smoking hot the other night. Yeah.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a big win. I think it's going to be over 10.
Cool. All right. That's all I want to know.
We'll see. I'm just excited for basketball to get in the rear view mirror so that the hockey Frozen 4 comes this week, which I'm excited about. Well, that's it for this edition of the podcast. Again, subscribe. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember, the fight to take back the country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together. See you next time.
Have a good night.